Hi, I'm Kanah Teagyn with Academy of Energy Healers, and this is my gift to all my supporters that made it possible for me to go to the Dimensional Mastery training. So this is my Dimensional Mastery Tour review. And I'm really grateful to share this with all of you. One of the things that I experienced as I was preparing to go to this training was, one, the support, the interest from my community, from the people who know me, who have worked with me, and just loved ones that are interested in supporting and giving love and encouragement for what I'm doing in the work that I do as a healer and a teacher. So in my experience in the Dimensional Mastery, there was always, to begin with, a question. One of my questions was, how practical is it to explore other dimensions? Does it really have some basis for the work that I do? And that's a question that I went into the training with, and I continue to ask throughout the training. So I came home with a resounding yes to that. There is absolutely practical application for accessing the dimensions, for the practice that we did while we were there. And it was an absolutely amazing experience to be with these 16, 17 other people that were in the training, and to experience their level of awareness and commitment. There were several things that came through in that training as we listened to our teacher, Starr Fuentes, and the co-teacher with her was Suzan Rossi. And both of them are masters in their own right in the processes that they teach. And the Dimensional Mastery training comes from ancient Mayan traditions and beliefs, and it is something that Starr has prepared and presented and made available for people here in the United States and all over the world. In fact, in my group of classmates in this training, there were 9 countries represented. So it was quite an international group, and it was amazing to sit with them and to hear all the different languages and to get a sense of and appreciation for the different cultures. And then to know that from all these different countries, from all these different backgrounds, people were coming together with this single common goal, and that was to really learn how to master navigating the dimensions. So to begin with, dimensions are something that most of us take for granted in this universe, that there are 3 spatial dimensions. And we often talk about the 3rd dimension. Once in a while we hear talk of the 4th dimension being like time, and very rarely do I hear people talking about 5th or 6th dimension. In the Dimensional Mastery training, we were given the information, the downloads, the experience and practice for dimensions 7 through 112. And our teacher, Starr Fuentes, had explained to us that in the ancient Mayan tradition, there are 144 known dimensions. So we're familiar with dimensions 1 through 3 and a little bit with 4 and possibly 5. There's not as much talked about with 6, and then there are the 7 through 112 dimensions that most people are just not aware of. And this is what we were practicing in accessing and becoming familiar with and gaining the information on during the dimensional mastery training. So if you can think of a dot being no dimension, and you double the dot and connect it with a line, then you have one dimension. It's a line. If you double a line, so we have a line here and double it here and connect it, then we have a square. And that's a two-dimensional representation. Then when we double the square, so I have a square here and a square here, and connect all the vertices, then I have a cube, and that's our third dimension. Now imagine doubling the cube and connecting all the vertices. Then we have something very different, and it's very difficult to perceive it in our third dimensional perception. But there are some graphics that I have found as I've searched for a little more information on YouTube. You can just search on Google on the internet and look for what's it called? Fourth dimension graphics, or a hypercube. That's what it was called. A hypercube is what's represented when you double a cube and connect all the vertices. It's the fourth dimension. So, and that can just give you a little bit of awareness. There are other recordings and speeches, talks about the other dimensions, even up through 11 dimensions, from what I have seen and found on the internet. And so there's lots of different ways to gain a little bit of background and information about those. But what was unique and what was really valuable about this dimensional mastery training is that, one, I was in an absolutely beautiful setting in Gulf Shores, Alabama, right on the beach. The house that we occupied was a very large structure that was divided into two identical facilities, and we took over the entire house because of the number of people that we had. And the house had a pool at the back, and just beyond the pool was the beach. And so we were blessed to have a beautiful setting. Very often when we were out on the beach in the morning doing our yoga exercises, we would often see dolphins, and that was quite an enjoyment. In fact, there were several times that members of our class were prepared. They had swimsuits under their exercise clothes, and they peeled them off as soon as they saw the dolphins and went running out into the water to attempt to catch up with him, which is pretty much impossible. We hadn't quite mastered the dimension of speed swimming. So we never made it out to actually swim with dolphins. But the dolphins were present, and any of you that have any experience with dolphin energy, you know how beautiful and magical that is. And then, so we had this beautiful setting, and it was at this large body of water, and the energy of the water is really important. And another thing that Starr shared with us is that the in-between spaces of our planet are considered very magical. There's a lot of power in the in-between, like when shore meets, when water meets the shore, there's that in-between space. When the tree line meets the granite, the upper parts of the mountain, that's an in-between place. The horizon, where the sky seems to meet the earth, that's also an in-between place, and they're considered very magical, very powerful spaces. And there are certain times that are also in between, like dusk and dawn. Those are in between times and carry a lot of magic and power in them. So we had we had practices, we had exercises every single day, and a lot of class time. There was a lot of opportunity to get a huge amount of information. And there was information that was given to us that it expanded what we were focusing on in the dimensions, in working in accessing the dimensions and experiencing the dimensions. Then there was also lots of opportunities for us to do personal work, spiritual work, to gain skills and tools for teaching classes and presenting materials for our own communities when we go home. So in addition to having my own experience with the dimensions, I also have a whole host of additional information and processes and skills and tools that I can now share and bless our community with. Here in Utah and in the Mountain West states where most of our connections are, but all across the country. And so with the beautiful support and expertise that I have in my partner in business, Pearl, we have a whole lot of things to offer at this point. And one of the things that we have made available to our community is a class called Basic Dimensions, where we introduce the class members to the 7th, 8th, and 9th dimensions. And that's a really amazing experience for those that have already been through that class with us. There is a resounding feedback that it's pretty amazing, magical stuff. So, so when you think about accessing dimensions 7 through 112, that's a lot, and we're hardly even available, or not available, but we're hardly even familiar with the dimensions of the lower dimensions. Like I said, 4th, 5th, 6th dimensions are really not even as well talked about, or have very much information about. But a lot of times we have experienced dimensions and not known what it is, and we have sometimes we have experiences and we refer to them as miracles or magic, or something it's just beyond our understanding of how things work. And when we have those experiences and we have some kind of inkling or an expression that it's magical, there's a tendency to kind of compartmentalize it and say, well, that was that. I mean, there's so many people that are interested in magic. We all love magic, right? There's Harry Potter. How many movies have there been of Harry Potter? And obviously it's pretty popular because the movie makers all made lots of money on those because people are interested in that. Lord of the Rings, and what are some other magical movies?
Houdini.
Yeah, people love the stories of Houdini and the things that he performed and did, his magic. So this ring is completely stuck on these two horseshoes, and it looks impossible. But the trick, the magic, is to get the ring off of that. So I have this ability to get the ring off. How is that possible? Well, what's even more magical is that I can actually put it back on. And when you don't see the actual mechanics of what I'm doing, it's very easy to think, ah, that's magical. But this time I'm going to show you a little bit about what I'm doing with it. Oh, now it's not going to work as smoothly because I'm showing it to you, right? There you go. And then if I show you that way, so now you can see that I'm actually doing something that makes it possible. But unless you know the specific mechanics of it, it can still look like, wow, how did she do that, right? And a lot of times what we term to be magic or miracles is something that is just beyond our explanation of what we know. So consider that magic really is possible, that we really do have magic in our lives, that we create magic, that it's available to us. We just get to know some of the mechanics about it, and then it doesn't. It's not that it loses its wonder, because that's pretty amazing. Whoever thought of that? It's not that it loses its wonder, and that's what I've come across with some people, is they don't want to know the mechanics because they think that that the wonder and the interest will be spoiled, and then they won't enjoy it as much. I happen to be one of those people on this planet who disagrees. I like knowing the mechanics. I like knowing the explanations. And if you think about it, I mean, today we have a little device that we hold in the palm of our hand that has access to this incredible, wide, unseen connection with what we call the internet. And so we hold this little tiny device in our hands, and we have access to generations of knowledge and experience in the whole history of mankind. Everything that's been recorded is pretty much available to us, literally at our fingertips. We can hold it in our hand in something as small as this. Even in my parents' day, this would have been considered, at the very least, it would have been science fiction. And it really was, because you think about, I was born in '61, and soon after that came out Star Trek, and they had this crazy idea of devising doors that opened automatically. And now look, every time you go into a grocery store or to any store anywhere, you walk in and there's doors that open just by you walking up to it. And you know, back when Star Trek first came out, that was science fiction, and it was cool, and they had, like, you know, tricks and ways that they could, you know, make it look like it was automatic because it was on camera. But now it's a reality, and so is this kind of a thing. My dad is in the first graduating class of computer science. When he was in college, he went to Brigham Young University and was in the very first graduating class in 1962. And so, so my dad was learning how to use and work with computers when computers were huge machines that filled up an entire floor of a building. I mean, they were just huge, and they were devised. It took this huge machine to take calculations in a very quick way, and that's what they wanted computers for. But now we have computers that we just hold in our hands. They not only make very quick calculations, but they also have access to, I mean, we can talk to people clear across the world just, you know, on this little device. And so where if I went back just 100 years, this would have been considered magic, or maybe even, you know, it would have been considered what's the word I'm thinking of? Black magic. It would have been considered like a tool of the devil, because people don't understand it. They could not explain how a little rectangular piece of something that, by the way, it has colors, and what is this material? I mean, just the material it's made out of would totally throw people off. But there would be no way for them to explain, and let alone comprehend, that holding a little rectangular piece of material in my hands could give me access to pretty much all the libraries of the world, and be able to talk to somebody across the country and even FaceTime with them, as well as has a calculator in it, and it stores my calendar and reminds me. It has my alarm clock and reminds me when I have appointments and all those kinds of things. That's just beyond the comprehension of people 100 years ago, or even 50, 60 years ago. That it would just be out of their ability to comprehend, and therefore it would be relegated to either magic, black magic, or science fiction. So in that same way, we can learn about and access the specific purpose and power of the different dimensions when we get more information. Now, frankly, I don't know exactly how a cell phone works. I don't know how those little circuits and miniature transistors or whatever it is that they have in it, I don't know exactly how that works, but I don't have to know all of the mechanics of it to be able to appreciate it and use it. It's a matter of becoming familiar with what seems to be unfamiliar. Working in the dimensions is much like working with magic. Working together as a class, this is what we were focused on, is becoming familiar with what seems to be unfamiliar. And that's what our 30 days of training was really about. So what I want to share with you today is some of the experiences that I had, and the way that accessing the dimensions makes it possible to increase our healing abilities, and to be able to tap into the power that makes life and interacting with each other and with the world a little bit more interesting and enjoyable. And one of those things that there are different categories of dimensions. There are teleportation dimensions, or invisibility dimensions. There are creation dimensions. And then within each of those sections or categories of dimensions, there are multiple dimensions that specifically focus on one aspect of it or another. And at any rate, being able to practice the combinations of dimensions that assist in manifesting was a lot of what our training was about. That's what we were practicing on a daily basis. So one of the things that we were invited to do to practice was spoon bending. Some of you have seen The Matrix, and you're familiar with the scene where he's the main character is being taught how to bend a spoon, and he gets frustrated, and I have looked at that. I've watched that movie and appreciated a lot of the information and the concepts that were there, but also wondered about what practical application does spoon bending have? So I think it was partly because of that doubt that I had when that activity was introduced to us and we were asked to practice it, that I was not able to bend my spoon. I mean, everybody in the classroom around me, with the exception of maybe 2 other people, they were able to hold their spoon, access those dimensions, and pretty soon the spoon just bent. It was easy. And I was beginning to feel a little bit frustrated. So I had one of my classmates showed me a note he had made of these are the combinations of dimensions that he uses to create that. And so I was practicing one night on my spoon, and sure enough, when I just let go of that doubt and the expectation of how it was supposed to look, I used the combination of dimensions that he recommended, and my spoon bent. It really was easy. And basically it's a matter of being able to access dimensions that separate and soften the elements of the spoon so that it really becomes, it's just as easy as bending a pipe cleaner, you know, those little fuzzy pipe cleaners that we use in craft things. It was just that easy. And when another activity that we were given and asked to work on and practice with was walking through walls. Now, we didn't actually walk through walls, but we started with just putting our hand up to a wall, accessing the dimensions that assist in, I think it's more like spreading the elements of the wall so that my hand could go through. And I had a couple of classmates who actually were able to put their hand through into the wall. My experience wasn't quite that far, but I did experience a softening so that the wall became spongy and I could feel the give in it. And that may sound kind of weird and way out there, and wow, that's way too far out, too magical sounding, that is without an explanation, that why would that be useful? Well, one of the things, as I was sharing some of these experiences with my daughter Aaliyah when I got home, she said, "Oh, but Mom, that's exactly how the ancient people in Peru built those walls and the stones of Machu Picchu." And so she explained to me how she had been told when she went there on a tour that that they had technology, they had awareness and ability to literally form matter. So they could bring in stones that seemed impossible. From our mechanical standpoint, we look at what they were able to build and consider it impossible, but evidently they had the technology, the ability to work with the dimensions that makes that possible. So building structures, even really large structures, is a practical application for being able to access those dimensions, change the molecular structure, and shift things to make a structure. Another thing that we worked with was the dimensions that make it possible to levitate. And our levitation practice was with a feather, which our teacher said, somebody said something about, well, gosh, a feather is so light, that should be easy, right? And she goes, exactly. Why not make it easy? She said, we're not at the place where we're ready to levitate like a person or something very heavy or very big, so let's just practice with a feather. And once you get used to, familiar with accessing the dimensions that make levitation possible, then you can graduate to working with things that are a little bit bigger, heavier, that kind of thing. And there again, practical application for levitation, that's pretty obvious, I think, because if we know how to levitate, then lifting and transporting things is an easy thing. It completely eliminates the concern for physical exertion, injury, just making life a little easier. I had a few classmates who reported that they were actually able to levitate their feathers. So I didn't actually experience my feather lifting off of the surface, but I did experience being able to get it to vibrate and to move a little bit. Using these dimensions, accessing them, and making something like that work requires an extreme amount of focus. The other thing that we were instructed to practice on was walking on water. Now, I'm a firewalk instructor, and I have done firewalks for a lot of years, and I've had lots of amazing experiences with that. So walking on water seems like really crazy out there. What's the purpose of that kind of thing? And I get that it requires a little bit of faith and imagination to get to the point where it feels like that's a practical thing to do. So we were given a couple of dimensions to work with to make that happen, and every single day we were given time to practice in the pool and to practice also on the beach, on the water, at the beach. And so with those dimensions, we started by working in the pool and just holding our hands, just kind of resting on the top of the water and working those dimensions, and getting used to changing the density of the water so that it became like more solid. That's the idea. So every day we would work on this, and there came a point where I was able to feel how solid the water was becoming in focusing on this combination of dimensions. And there was a point where I was able to press like to the point that my heels were able to come off the bottom of the pool and lift up a little bit. We actually had one of our classmates who pushed herself all the way up, and like with no feet on the, and her weight was pressed on the surface of the pool. There were several of our classmates who actually were able to walk, and walking was considered 2 steps or more. So several of our classmates did experience walking 2 steps or more. And I personally had a couple of experiences where where one foot went down. I was walking out on the beach, and I put one foot down and put my weight on it and had no sand under my foot. It was just on top of the water for just a moment. and then continued walking. And that happened for me a couple of times. So I did have that feeling, that sensation of, oh wow, this is really possible, as well as, you know, the reports and the experience of watching other classmates who were able to experience that as well. So my feeling about the walking on water and the practicality of that and the necessity of that practice was really supported by a story that Starr shared with us. And she talked about how the master teacher Jesus walked on water. And there's a couple of instances in stories of the Bible where it reports that is exactly what he did. He walked on water, and at one point, even one of his disciples, Peter, wanted to join him and came out of the boat and on the water, started to sink and asked for help, and Jesus helped him to stand up and so he wouldn't drown. But what I felt like was most important, and this is what Starr shared with us, was that the miracles that Jesus performed, the healing, the walking on water, changing water to wine, causing the blind to see, all of those things were really amazing. They were miraculous. And what was significant about that is that his performing those miracles was nothing more and nothing less than his expression of being a dimensional master. And he was able to perform those miracles because he mastered accessing and using the power of the different dimensions, and knowing what combinations of dimensions serve to create things like transforming water into wine, like healing the sick and the blind and the lame, and causing even someone who has died to rise again, the miracle of resurrection. All of that was an expression of his dimensional mastery. It's what we do when we are tapping into that. So there's a lot of different ways that we can serve the planet, that we can make things happen, that we can create things that will serve humanity as a whole, by knowing how to access these dimensions, knowing how to be familiar with them enough that we can use the recipes of the dimensions that make things that seem impossible possible. And one of the things that we have as a whole, as a general populace, we've been exposed to parts of this. For instance, the book and movie The Secret incited a lot of interest and excitement about the creative powers of our minds. There was that interest and that excitement about that book and movie was based on the focus that they gave about the law of attraction. And the message was, if you understand the law of attraction and you work with it and you use positive thoughts, then you can bring positive things into your life. You can experience health and healing and good relationships and money and other material things, and you can bring those things into your life by focusing your thoughts in a positive way. There were certain elements of that message that were either inadequately conveyed or completely missed. And those, I'm going to share with you 3 of those things that came out in the training that are key ingredients in being able to really access and use the law of attraction as it's described in The Secret, and the dimensions so that we can create things that we really want to create, to bless our lives, to bless and serve humanity. One of those things is impeccability. So there were many times that Starr would say to us, you must be impeccable in every aspect. If you are not impeccable in your physical environment, there is no way that you will have the level of connection with these other dimensions in order to create what you want. So each one of us took part in what we called sacred service, and basically their household chores. And so we all had the opportunity to clean toilets and scrub bathrooms and sweep and mop floors and scrub dishes and do laundry and sweeping, dusting, washing windows. All of that was part of our daily routine. And every single mealtime was an exercise in sacred service, because we had 2 chefs that were preparing meals all throughout the day and serving us that way. And everything going into those meals was of a very high vibration. The chefs were blessing the food as they prepared it. We always had a blessing on the food when we came together to participate in the meal. And then the cleanup, every single mealtime, the cleanup was absolute. Like nothing was left behind, no food was left out, no dish was left uncleaned. Every pot and pan was scrubbed to shining. And Starr stressed with us the importance of knowing what the condition of our physical environment was. And in knowing what our physical environment condition was, then we would have the ability to access the other dimensions other than the 3rd dimension that we are always so very connected to and present in this world, in this life experience. So being impeccable was absolutely essential. She talked to us about impeccability in our words, and then we get to go to impeccability in our thoughts, impeccable in our feelings, impeccable in what we choose to focus on. Every single thing that we desire to be in co-creation with, in creating and bringing into our lives, we must look at all the other parts of our lives and know that impeccability is an essential, very key ingredient. And then another thing that she really stressed with us is taking action. She would get really emphatic and passionate about describing people who have come to her and said, well, I'm thinking good thoughts and I want this, and so I'm just waiting for it to happen. And she says, no, that's not going to work. You must take physical action, impeccable physical action, in order to bring anything into this 3rd dimension. And our ability to manifest only serves when we bring it into the 3rd dimension. So it's not just about imagining it out there and or experiencing it even in another dimension, but it's about bringing what we want into this 3rd dimension. It's necessary for us to be fully engaged and really living out our purpose on this 3rd dimension to bring things into it, manifest it. So there's impeccability and action, and then one of the other ingredients that is so very key and so important is one that kind of trips us up sometimes, and that is our feelings. So in order for us to fully engage in our action, it has to be accompanied with a feeling. There has to be an emotion, an energy and motion that we pull in, and that is what ignites the fire that makes things happen. So we cannot be dispassionate about what we want or what we're creating. In fact, the only time that we actually do create things is when there is a very strong feeling that accompanies it. So I remember reading in Greg Braden's book, The Isaiah Effect, discovering or uncovering, I can't remember the subtitle exactly, uncovering the lost art of prayer. And he talks about traveling around Tibet and visiting these different monasteries where they are observing and asking questions and having the opportunity to experience these people who have devoted their entire lives to prayer. And at one point, after visiting several different places, he asked the abbot of the monastery that he and his entourage went to, that was in the more of the interior of Tibet. He said, we've watched you, we've seen you praying, swaying and chanting and singing and speaking mantras, and he says we see all this, and so we have seen the prayers, but I wonder what's really happening. And the abbot just kind of smiled at him and he said, that's not the prayer. Those are the rituals, those are the activities that get us to the feeling. It's all of this, the swaying, the singing, the mantras, the chanting, all of that is designed to invite a feeling. And it's the feeling that is the prayer. That's our connection with the divine. And so he said, it's not just a matter of speaking words. That's not what makes a prayer. The prayer is the connection with the divine, and we achieve that by tapping into and going to the feeling that creates that direct connection. So feelings are essential in order for us to be able to manifest. Taking action is vital. We cannot create anything in this physical realm without doing something physically that brings it in. And impeccability, being absolutely committed to the perfect details. And that doesn't mean that there aren't differences or variations, because a lot of times in our Western mentality, there's a thought or a feeling that perfection is sterility, like there's very little variation, and that's not the case in real creation. And what is the case is being able to take in all the variances and to notice any details, anything that is amiss, anything that is out of order, or anything that is not in alignment with what we want. Then we take care of that. We clean it up. We make certain that our environment, our thoughts, our words, our intentions, our deeds are all aligned with what we want, what is really going to serve the highest good. So those are the three things that I invite you to be fully aware of: impeccability, taking action, and acknowledging and feeling your feelings, and using your feelings to be the fire that creates in this realm. Those are the lessons. Those are the bits of information that I came home with that have served me so well in increasing my awareness, my ability to be a healer and a teacher. So now, as I go about preparing for teaching light language, and we're going to be starting up again in a new divine intervention course that will start in January, with Pearl teaching and my assisting. And when we consider all of those things that we can do, that we can serve with, all those elements absolutely must be present. The elements of accessing the dimensions through the impeccability, taking action, and accessing our emotions and using feelings to ignite it. Then also when we're teaching and sharing the basic dimensions in the class that we're offering for people who are interested in that, this is an essential part. The basic dimensions are ways of us accessing the information of our past, the ability to connect with light and see and feel and experience light and work with light. And then also the opportunity to see, experience, and call on the celestial realm, where we can receive guidance and tap into even greater knowledge and understanding. So having this opportunity to go through the dimensional mastery training enlightened and enlivened everything that I'm doing with Pearl and the Academy of Energy Healers, and providing trainings in the light language, in the basic dimensions, in divine intervention, and all of the other many things that we have put on our calendar that we make available to our community. It's all designed to bless, enlighten, and heal our communities. And so thank you again for your support. Thank you for making this training possible for me. And thank you for participating now as we go forward and present all the wonderful skills and opportunities that we have to share this with our world, and making our families and our experience even a better experience. So this concludes my Dimensional Mastery review, and again, I express my gratitude for all of you who have supported and contributed to my training, and I invite you to be a part of the classes, the events, the workshops, and the trainings that we're doing at Academy of Energy Healers. Look forward to seeing you.